The plague had appeared in Europe before, but this time it was different. Why did it spread so fast? Why did it kill so many? Over 7 years, it would claim an estimated 50 million lives, roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. How could one disease bring entire cities to silence? What made this outbreak unlike any before? This was the catastrophe that would come to be known to history as the Black Death. The plague did not begin in Europe. Long before 1347, the bacterium, Yersinia pestis, existed in rodent populations across Central Asia. For centuries, it moved quietly between wild animals, rarely drawing attention. But in the early 14th century, something changed. Trade between East and West was expanding. The Silk Road connected China, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Merchant caravans crossed deserts, ships sailed constantly between ports, and with them, hidden in grain stores and cargo holds, came rats. In 1346, the plague reached the Crimean port city of Kaffa. According to some accounts, during a siege, infected bodies were catapulted over the city walls. Whether exaggerated or not, the disease spread rapidly among traders. By October 1347, ships fleeing the region arrived in Sicily. Sailors were already dying. Witnesses described fever, vomiting, and painful black swellings, buboes, under the arms and around the groin. Many died within days. From Sicily, the disease spread with terrifying speed. Within months, it reached Genoa and Venice, then Marseille, then Paris, then London. By 1349, it was sweeping through England and Germany. By 1350, it had reached Scandinavia. This wasn't just fast, it was unprecedented. So why was this outbreak so much worse than earlier ones? Why did it kill not thousands, but tens of millions? To understand that, we need to look at medieval Europe itself, a continent already weakened, hungry, crowded, and completely unprepared. By the mid-14th century, Europe had reached the limits of its growth. For over 100 years, the population had expanded steadily. Forests were cleared, marshlands drained, and new farmland cultivated to feed more mouths. But by 1300, much of that land was marginal, thin soil, low yields, vulnerable to bad weather. When the climate cooled during the early years of the so-called Little Ice Age, harvests became unpredictable. Then came the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. Years of relentless rain destroyed crops, drowned livestock, and exhausted food reserves. Millions died. Those who survived were left physically weakened, many permanently malnourished. Most Europeans lived at subsistence level. Peasants worked land they did not own, bound by feudal obligations to provide labor, rent, or crops to their lords. Even in good years, survival was uncertain. In bad years, hunger was constant. Towns were growing, but infrastructure lagged behind. Waste disposal was primitive. Water sources were easily contaminated. Domestic animals often shared living space with humans. Medical knowledge was based largely on ancient authorities like Galen, focused on balancing bodily humors rather than understanding contagion. Trade networks connected Europe more tightly than ever before. Markets bustled, roads were busy, and ports thrived. Economically, this brought opportunity. Biologically, it created vulnerability. A densely connected society is a fragile one when confronted with epidemic disease. Religious faith framed how people understood suffering. Illness was often interpreted as divine punishment or a test of faith. Communities turned to prayer, processions, and ritual in times of crisis. Yet, beneath the surface, Europe was strained, economically stretched, nutritionally weakened, socially rigid. This was not a continent in stability, it was a continent under pressure. And when extreme mortality struck, it would not merely wound Europe, it would expose its weaknesses and force a transformation in labor, power, faith, and daily life itself. In many regions, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population died. Entire villages disappeared from records. In parts of England, France, and northern Italy, farmland lay abandoned for years. Labor became scarce, and therefore powerful. Surviving peasants demanded higher wages or moved in search of better conditions. Authorities attempted to resist this shift. In England, the Statute of Labourers, 1351, tried to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and restrict mobility. Enforcement proved uneven. The chronicler Henry Knighton noted the reversal of fortunes. Many who had been beggars before the pestilence now possessed wealth. Inheritance reshaped property ownership. Social mobility, once rare, became possible. Yet the transformation was not only economic. In Florence, Giovanni Boccaccio described the breakdown of social bonds during the epidemic. Brother abandoned brother, uncle, nephew, sister, brother, and oftentimes husband, wife. Fear had fractured trust at the most intimate level. But out of catastrophe came adaptation. Italian port cities, heavily exposed to maritime trade, began experimenting with systematic containment. In 1377, the Adriatic port of Ragusa, modern Dubrovnik, required arriving ships and travelers from plague-affected areas to remain isolated for 30 days, later extended to 40 days, giving rise to the term quarantine, from the Italian 40 giorni, 40 days. By the early 15th century, Venice established permanent plague hospitals, known as lazzarettos, on isolated islands to separate the sick from the healthy. These were among the first institutionalized public health measures in European history. Urban authorities also began paying closer attention to waste removal, street cleaning, and burial regulation. Not because they understood bacteria, but because experience had shown that unmanaged disease could destabilize entire cities. When the mass graves were covered and the worst had passed, Europe did not enter a new golden age overnight. It entered a quieter reality, one shaped by memory. The generation that survived carried something new, the knowledge that entire societies could fracture within months. That certainty never fully disappeared. Populations slowly recovered across the 15th century. Trade networks stabilized. Political institutions endured. In many regions, survivors experienced improved access to land and resources compared to the strained decades before 1347. But the disease itself had not ended. Plague returned in recurring waves across Europe for centuries. Some outbreaks were regional, others were catastrophic. In 1665, London suffered what became known as the Great Plague of London, one of the last major urban plague epidemics in Western Europe. In 1894, a new global outbreak began in China, initiating what historians call the Third Plague Pandemic. Steamships and imperial trade routes carried it across continents. It persisted into the 20th century. Today, plague still exists in isolated areas of the world. It is rare and treatable with antibiotics, but it has never been completely eradicated. The Black Death was not an isolated medieval horror. It was a reminder of something constant in human history. Disease evolves alongside civilization. What changed after the 14th century was humanity's response. More structured governance, more systematic public health measures, and eventually, scientific medicine. The plague never truly left, but neither did resilience. And that tension between vulnerability and adaptation is one of the defining forces of history. If you value history told with depth, context, and respect for the sources, support this work. Like the video, subscribe to The History Preacher, and join a community that studies the past seriously.